Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, they still got business to attend to finish out the 2024 season. That doesn't mean Oregon is just going to sit on their hands in terms of this transfer portal window opening up. And although it might not be at the forefront of Oregon fans' minds right now, I can promise you it certainly is to people in that building. Hey, we're competing. We got a national championship caliber team in 2024. We want to make sure we got a national championship team in 2025 as well. Dan Lanning, you make no mistake about it. This is not a 1 year and rebuild. This is an Oregon program that is aiming to, and I fully expect them to, compete for national championships every single year. In order to do so, you got to get proactive in the transfer portal. I think Oregon is one of those programs that I think they handle the modern era of college football roster building just about as good as anybody across the country. They recruit at the high school ranks. They're aggressive in the transfer portal, but you look at their hit rate in terms of transfer portal additions. I mean, they hit. They are very targeted. They are very intentional in terms of what players they want to bring in. And you look at the transfer portal players on this Oregon roster in 2024, a lot of those guys are the reason Oregon is having so much success in the 2024 season. I want to take a look at some positions that you kind of project what this roster is going to look like at the end of 2024. All right, what positions do we want to address in the transfer portal over the next couple of weeks? We've got some players to talk about as well. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Oregon fans, would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. A lot of different takes to be had in terms of where Oregon should go in the portal. Would love to hear from y'all. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. A special shout out to the Oregon fans. Ton of support y'all have shown the boys over the last 12 months. We appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. And I want to start with this. It's really easy to look at this Oregon roster, this Oregon depth chart, and say, holy smokes, Oregon, they're going to lose a lot of players to the NFL draft after this year. Yeah, that might be true. Guess what? Dan Lanning was not sitting on his hands over the last couple of years with the high school recruiting trail. I mean, they've stacked some really good classes together. So, yes, you have some big names that will be moving on to the NFL. There's also a lot of young talent on this roster that, in my opinion, is ready to step up and kind of be difference makers for Oregon in 2025. Now, let's look at the defensive line. This was, kind of that primary position that Oregon wanted to address after 2023 that did so in a big way with guys like Jamari Caldwell and Derek Harmon. I would expect them to do so as well again this year. Now, I think it's kind of a different conversation because Oregon in 2024, that high school recruiting class, guys like Jericho Johnson and Aiden Breland, they're going to be ready. They might have not been ready in 2024 as true freshmen. You have a good sense that they're going to be ready to go in 2025. So you have some young talent that, although we haven't seen play good football or I shouldn't say play good football, play much football, you kind of expect good football from them in 2025. But you make no mistake about it. What makes, at least in my opinion, this Oregon team different than it was in 2023, I think partially it's been one of the best defensive lines in all of college football. Bear Alexander getting a lot of buzz to Oregon. This is a unique one. Bear Alexander's ceiling, and we say this all the time when we talk about Bear, it is about as high as it gets in terms of when you see the flashes of him play at the Power 4 level. One of the best defensive linemen in the country. The key is you obviously have some off the field, and I'm not going to speak too much on the off the field stuff because I don't know Bear Alexander personally. Not going to speak on his character or person, but you have heard some rumors, and you also have you've seen the inconsistency in play on the football field as well with their own two eyes. My take on Bear Alexander is I think this is one of those unique good fits. One of the things nobody talks about with Dan Lanning, everybody wants to talk about talent evaluation and the roster building that Oregon has done, which is a very good aspect of what Dan Lanning has done. Not a lot of people want to talk about the culture that has been implemented in Eugene, Oregon. Yeah, Bear Alexander, consistency problems, maybe some off the field stuff. What better locker room to get the best out of Bear Alexander than what's going on in Eugene, Oregon? So to me, I look at Bear Alexander and say that seems to be a really good spot for Bear Alexander to land going into 2025. I think this one would make a lot of sense. And I would think Oregon continues to swing big and continue to try to get those game records on the middle of the defensive line. The edge rusher position, you're just fine. Mateo Tatum, young guys going into year 3. You got guys like Elijah Rushing waiting in the wings. I think on the edge, you're going to be just fine. You probably want to continue to build that depth on the inside of the defensive line, along with what could be game wreckers. Another position I think Oregon fans might want to address here, the tight end spot. We know Kenny Sadiq's going to be one of the best tight ends I think he currently is one of the better tight ends in the country. Will certainly be one of the best tight ends in the country in 2025. You got one guy missing on Lincoln Cure, who I think within that Oregon staff, they kind of expected him to be a freshman that comes in and provides value right away. Probably looking to add one in the portal. What kind of tight end? I would try to mimic what you got going on with Terrence Ferguson and Kenyon Sadiq and that dynamic you see. Go get an all-purpose tight end that can be a difference maker like Terrence Ferguson can and do all those things that you want a tight end to do, allowing Oregon to continue to be creative with a guy like Kenyon Sadiq. Luke Haas from Arkansas, he's one of my favorite tight ends currently in the portal. One, he's not the biggest, 6'3", 240, blocks his tail off. His true freshman year at Arkansas was well on his way to being a freshman All-American and then goes down with a season-ending injury. And then in 2024, just didn't get that much opportunity within this Arkansas offense. Hasn't dropped a football in his first 2 years at Arkansas. He 85% completion percentage when he's targeted, which is a number I always look for when I'm looking at tight ends. Like, hey, tight ends, you want high percentage target share tight ends, meaning let me rephrase that. Meaning when you're throwing at a tight end, you want the completion percentage to be high. That's what you want in a tight end, a reliable pass catcher. 85% completion percentage when Luke Haas has been targeted, that's a really good one. And I think Oregon can swing a really big stick in terms of tight end recruitment. So we use a lot of 12 personnel, and tight ends are featured in this Oregon offense, which not a lot of other Power 4 programs can say about their offense. Luke Haas probably be my pick. Wide receiver is an interesting one. There's a chance you certainly lose Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden. Evan Stewart's that kind of name that I'm looking at and say, I think Evan Stewart could come back for one more year and kind of turn himself into a first-round NFL draft pick, but he certainly could go to the NFL and probably still be a top 100 pick. Depending on if Evan Stewart decides to stay or leave, probably depends on the number of wide receivers you take in the portal. I like the young talent on this Oregon roster. You talk about guys like Jurion Dickey or Lowe. You got Dallas Wilson and DeCorian Moore, Jeremiah McClellan. I look at the young talent in this wide receiver and say, I think they could just be fine not taking a wide receiver, but you look at that and say, I wouldn't mind having a proven commodity at the college football level heading into 2025. Now, Jonte Cook, not totally sure if he's that guy. Jonte Cook, super, super talented kid. And you've seen it on the college. You haven't seen it consistently, but you've seen it his first 2 years at Texas. Not as involved in the offense as he wants. His transfer portal. He's very interested in coming to Oregon from what he's been saying. I wouldn't say he's a boomer bust because I know he's a good football player, but he's not necessarily that proven contributor commodity that Oregon might be looking for. Would be a great ad and just kind of see what he looks like. A guy that I would look at, again, I think this is the wide receiver position, and we saw this just get reflected on the recruiting trail. It's an attractive offense to come play wide receiver, right? There's a reason DeCorian Moore, Dallas Wilson are coming to Eugene, Oregon from down south. Eric Singleton Jr., in my opinion, one of, if not the best wide receivers currently in the portal, he'd be a guy. He's an all-purpose guy, 5'11", $190, really good after the catch, consistently attacks the deeper third. Over 700 yards receiving both of his first 2 years at the college football level. One of the do-it-all playmakers that you're kind of looking to add in this Oregon offense, and I think would be a really good fit for offensive coordinator Will Stein. This one, I think Casey Concepcion, those would be the names that I'm looking for in the wide receiver room. And again, I think Dan Lanning probably has a better sense than we do in terms of where these younger wide receivers are at. And which ones of them do we trust to be guys for us in 2025? That will get reflected in terms of how many wide receivers Oregon decides to take. To me, the big question mark for Oregon going into 2025 is that offensive tackle. Johnny Cornelius going to the NFL. Josh Connolly, I would guess is too. I think he's played himself into a first-round pick. So you might have to replace both your starting offensive tackles. And there's not a ton of tackle bodies behind them that jump out at you. Now, they have some guys kind of in the crock pot that might be ready. I would guess Dan Lanning wants to bring in at least one bona fide starting tackle. This is a very hard position to address. The wide receiver position is easy. If Oregon wants to go grab a couple good wide receivers, they'll have no problem doing that because there's plenty of them. The offensive tackle spot, in my opinion, is a little bit more difficult. Now, it becomes easier to recruit offensive tackles when you send a Johnny Cornelius and Josh Connerly to the NFL. A lot of these guys are looking for a place where they can play one more year and then go to the NFL as well. Ethan Onua from Rice, probably a top 3 tackle in the portal currently. He's 6'6", 345, has started both at right and left tackle during his career, over 2,400 snaps at Rice. This one would make a lot of sense. Road grader in the run game. He was very good in pass protection last year, 350 pass pro opportunities, 1 sack, only 5 quarterback hurries. Very good against that one Power 4 competition he had against Houston. To me, I think he's a plug-and-play guy. And these kind of offensive tackles, to me, are the most attractive. Like, go get me some guys that, maybe were under-recruited out of high school, went to the G5 level, have played multiple seasons and started multiple seasons playing really good football, and then they want to jump up to the Power 4 level. There's little projection. We know they're good football players. Ethan would be a guy I'd be looking at. And then maybe at cornerback, but again, this is kind of similar to the wide receiver room. Yeah, you're losing some really good football players, but I also think you're so loaded at this position underneath them. You have Naheem Offord and Brandon Finney coming in, both of which I think can play early. Dakota Fields or Ify Obadegu, Sione Lalea. It's so much depth behind guys like Nico Reed and Jabbar Muhammad and Dante Manning. And so, yes, on the surface level, you're losing both your starting cornerbacks, but I think you have starting caliber cornerbacks that are just not playing for Oregon because they can't crack the starting lineup. That will be very good football players in 2025. That's kind of my take. Like, on the surface, people will, and I guarantee you this will be a conversation in the offseason. Oh, Oregon going to take a step back, losing probably 15 guys to the NFL draft. Why does Georgia and Alabama refill every year? Because they recruit. This was what's going on in Eugene, Oregon. And so, yeah, on the surface level, you might have a lot of glaring holes. I don't think they're as glaring as the national media is going to think. And we'll get a better sense of where Dan Lanning thinks he needs to add in terms of when he starts getting active in the portal. That's the way I look at it. That's kind of the sum of the positions that jump out to me. The one thing, and I wouldn't say it's a concern, but it's probably the biggest question mark I have for the 2025 version of the Oregon Ducks is who are you going to be your starting tackles? If you can answer that, this team's going to be really damn good in 2025 as well. Make no mistake about it. Oregon is going to be active, even though they're competing for a national championship. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Going to be fun breaking down the commitments, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.